What is up, everybody? Welcome to a special hour of the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast. We're presenting, of course, the Fantasy Walkabout. Today, no Tom Lee, as you can clearly see. The man beside me is bearded and beautiful. That's Chase Vernon at FF_intervention. You are the king of appearing on an emergency basis. It's become a specialty of yours, and we appreciate it.
Of course, man. Anything for you guys. I'm curious. Should I start talking in an Australian accent and try to fill his spot? I promise you, it's going to be terrible, but I can make an attempt if that's what you need.
No, but I think that your information will do his absence justice, and I think that's what really matters. Look, if you're new to the Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast Network, we have a couple of shows, a couple of brands, but today what we like to do is we like to keep the focus off of startup value. That is a key for us on the Fantasy Walkabout. Startup value is real easy. It's trending. But what about those teams that are 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, and the values just don't always seem to work with startup value? I don't know about you, Chase, but for me, it's very hard in leagues that are established to drop he's going in this round right now, so this is what I want him for.
Yeah, it's startups are different. I'm actually in a startup currently, and it's my first one of the year. And ADPs are kind of like all over the place. Actually, I'm sorry, it's my first one that I started. I actually completed my first one the other day with CBS Sports. And you kind of got to make a decision with startups. You got to make a decision as to what direction you're going to go in, because if you get a team that has, a bunch of veteran running backs and a bunch of, young wide receivers, typically, not always, but typically that's not going to work out, as well long term. Of course, you can consider that as like a rebuild type situation, but like I don't want CMC with, 2 rookie picks or something like that, because by the time these rookies are thriving outside of the case, and by the way, there are cases, right? There are cases like the Justin Jeffersons and the Jamar Chases. That's very rare, but when it comes to, picking CMC with another one of these rookies, by the time that the rookie wide receivers are ready to produce, CMC's out of league. And so you just wasted a pick essentially with CMC, and you probably kept yourself in limbo without having the ability to win due to drafting a very good player, but not drafting a veteran depth piece. So when it comes to startups, I have to make a decision. It normally happens after my second or third pick. And it's like, okay, am I ready to win now? Or should I pick a team based off of youth and go for future wins?
And that's what's tough about when negotiating and conversing with people about trades and your situations is you can't always say like, well, Michael Thomas is going in the 9th round right now, so I want him for like a mid-second or a late second. That person's likely going to look at you, get out of here. Like it's not always easy to translate that. So leading into that, there's a discussion that Jacob and I had, FF_RTDB, on the timeline when I had posted that tools like KTC or Keep Trade Cut and ADP's values and people's trade calculators and such, they don't always perfectly translate through conversation in established leagues. So today, when we do Punish a Tolly, now you being new here on the program,
Punish a Tolly.
That is Australian for a large beer. So on this segment here for Punish a Tolly, this is just a casual conversation. This isn't about the statistics. It's not about the numbers and the points per game. It's just a casual conversation you'd have with your friends over a Tolly or tall boy, as we would say here in North America. So when you're just having a casual conversation, how would you apply KTC or your ADPs, current ADPs, into these conversations? Because for me, it's tough. Because the second somebody comes to me, as I just mentioned, with the Michael Thomas for a second, because that's what his ADP is, or on Keep Trade Cut, right? Hollywood Browns wide receiver 29. You're not really going to get him for wide receiver 29 prices outside of, the rarities, the variance type trades that maybe you can go and find on DLF. There's always going to be examples of weird stuff. If somebody were to approach you, Chase, and say, hey, Marquise Brown is wide receiver 29 on KTC, that means his value is, like a late 2 and a third. Let's get that deal done. If someone approaches you with these things on an already established roster, how are you handling it?
So there's more in depth to this, like you talked about, and I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it has to do with the depth of your roster and what you need. Like you don't have to win a trade
Mm-hmm.
to win a trade. Like as long as you make your team better, that's good. So, for example, I made a trade this past offseason in 2021, and I got a lot of hate for it from my league mates and everything. But essentially, I traded
Always.
away CeeDee Lamb and Allen Robinson. I traded them both away for A.J. Brown. And right now, it's not looking too bad with the way that A.J. Brown finished in the playoffs. But at the beginning of the season, A.J. Brown was hurt. We expected more from Allen Robinson. CeeDee Lamb started out hot, and during the offseason, even I knew that I overpaid for it. But I also had God, I want to say I had Terry McLaurin on the roster. I had Justin Jefferson. I had T. Higgins. I had Tyler
Mm-hmm.
Lockett. I had all of these other assets at wide receiver. I needed to upgrade and get an elite piece. And I had A.J. Brown as my wide receiver 1. Now I had CeeDee Lamb as my wide receiver 5, I believe at the time, maybe 6, somewhere in that range. And so I felt that Allen Robinson on the downturn, I had a very young team overall, on the
Mm-hmm.
downturn was worth the price to add to CeeDee Lamb in order to get to who I thought was the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. So although I got a lot of hate on it, it's kind of looking good right now because I upgraded. I might have lost the trade in terms of who won value-wise,
Right.
but I won the trade in terms of making my roster better because I couldn't play all those wide receivers, in my starting lineups.
But that's what's important. Sometimes that the KTC or that ADP value doesn't mean anything based on your situation or how you personally value these players. And this is one of the things that I really wanted to get across in that conversation is if you have an entire league that is, running based solely on point value, trade calculator value, that is fantastic. And those tools will always be great conversation pieces within your negotiation, but the human element will always matter.
100%, 100%.
Yeah, and it's the human element, like being willing to take a L, quote unquote, on a value of a player. Now look what happened to CD Lamb's value; it has plummeted, and again, based a lot on the general feelings of him through KTC and ADP. The human element, I think, will always matter, and I think that that's a very underrated conversation within. Because again, it's easy in a startup when you're saying, well, I'll trade my rounds 2 and 5 for your, 3 and 4. The values are pretty easy, in my opinion, to figure out. Like Baker Mayfield's dropped to the 9th, 10th round, QB 20. Oh my gosh, I forget what it is off the top of my head, but QB 27. You're not actually in a league that's established going to get him for that cost. It's just not actionable. It's not going to happen. So it's always important to know your league, know your league mates. It's established leagues are just different. Just wanted to kick it off with that. We're going to take a second. When we come back, we're going to do a Yui. All right, Chase, these are doing a U-turn. We're going to go back and look at trades that we did months ago and see how we feel about them now. And then we're also going to review some of the poll results that we had posted from last week's episode. So sit tight. We're going to come right back. We're going to get into it and hopefully not hate ourselves after. One of the advantages of knowing that you have to be able to look at yourself and say, I was wrong, your process needed adjusting. These are some of the most important things needed to be successful in fantasy football. If you can't look at yourself and say, I made a mistake here, something went wrong, I made a poor decision, and how did I get there? You're probably not going to progress, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I just saw you're making a statement there because I full-heartedly agree with you. Yeah, I
Perfect.
mean, you got to learn from your mistakes. Maybe for example, going back to the trade that we just talked about, with Allen Robinson and CeeDee Lamb for A.J. Brown. If CeeDee Lamb had an excellent season, and A.J. Brown couldn't stay healthy, Allen Robinson was where he was at, I probably need to reevaluate where I had, A.J. Brown in a non-passing offense. So, just being able to learn from that kind of stuff and realize, hey, where you mess up on certain values and what you're giving up too.
That's one hundo P. So with that, I want to take an opportunity to put on the air. I'm going to ask you your opinion on these players and which one you would take, and then I will reveal the poll results for it, and we can kind of get into it. So Keenan Allen has been a hot button topic on this show the last 2 weeks. He is my number one veteran receiver target if I am trying to acquire him. I have been on record as saying I would trade Aaron Jones with something on top straight up for a player like Keenan Allen. I would do that without thinking twice about it. But let's go with Keenan Allen, Hollywood Brown, and Brandon Ayuk moving forward within Dynasty. Now, of course, if you're new to the fantasy walkabout, we only deal in PPR. We only deal in Superflex. That's it. This is where our values are based on. This is what we've been doing for a while now. So for you, Chase, Keenan with age, Hollywood with passing ambiguity, or Brandon Ayuk with Trey Lance coming in, who would you take personally out of this group?
Once again, it really depends. If I have a competing team, let's just say this is a startup and I started out with the Christian McCaffrey or something along those lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to go Keenan Allen here because he offers immediate value. You're going to see an immediate return in production. But I kind of like almost like lottery shot, I guess, with Hollywood Brown. You're going to have J.K. Dobbins coming back in the run game. The run game's going to get better, even more so than what it was last year for the Ravens, in my opinion, which should open up more play action opportunities, moving forward for Hollywood Brown, which is where he succeeds. It's when he has time to get down the field. They started using him a little bit more in the slot, which I like that for him. However, I think I'm going to go with Hollywood Brown here, just because I think that he's a nice little mix between offering immediate value and still being around for 3, 4, 5 years after. Plus, I like looking at the increased value after this year. So for me, I don't like what I'm going to see going forward with Brandon Ayuk. I don't think it's going to end up working for him with Trey Lance. Yep. Sure, he'll see some opportunities. Don't get me wrong. I don't like Brandon Ayuk personally, but I do think that he will produce in the back end wide receiver 2, maybe front end wide receiver 3 numbers. However, his volatility for me is too much. With Hollywood Brown, you can almost predict the weeks that he does well, and you can bench him, up against certain defenses. It's literally like clockwork with him as long as you study explosive passing plays and you study how the Ravens are working. So I think Hollywood Brown should see the most significant increase in ADP from this time to 2023. And so I want the value that's going to increase the most. That's Hollywood Brown, and I'm going to get value from him in the meantime.
Yep. And you know what's strange is Ayuk is just kind of like where Hollywood Brown was a couple of years ago. Now he's getting the rushing quarterback with the arm that's not as accurate. And Hollywood Brown is just the more proven version of Brandon Ayuk, in my opinion. The poll results, though, were shocking a little bit to me, right? Keenan Allen, 46%. This is obviously in a vacuum, but 46% for Keenan Allen, 30% Brandon Ayuk, and the people went with 24% Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown might be the most consistently disrespected receiver in fantasy football. He
really is. I mean, he gives you consecutive weeks, 5, 6, 7 straight weeks of high-end production, and then all of a sudden Lamar Jackson goes out and he doesn't produce as well. But that's to be expected when you go with the backup quarterback who can't get the ball down the field. Yeah. I mean, Mark Andrews saw his significant jump in production because he had a backup quarterback at the helm. Sure, he was fine with Lamar Jackson. I don't want to take anything away, but he wasn't what did he finish as the tight end 2, correct, on the season? Oh, he did finish. Okay,
well, we didn't include week 18, obviously.
Okay, he wouldn't have finished as the tight end 1 if the backup came in. If Lamar Jackson was the quarterback the entire year, he would not have finished as the tight end 1. I'm not even convinced he would have finished as a top 3 tight end, to be honest with you. He would have been right around that range, but
100%.
I'm not convinced. So
I think he would have been at his career averages for finishes. You know what I mean? And his points per game, I think, would have been. It was all touchdown variance with Lamar Jackson. We didn't really hit on that a lot this year, but another topic for another day. Our second trade. This one surprises me completely. This was another poll we put out. Ridley and Jeff Wilson. That's Calvin Ridley and Jeff Wilson for 105 and Keyshawn Vaughn. Which side of this in a vacuum, just nice and quick, which side of this in a vacuum would you have selected?
Give me that again. It's Jeff Wilson and Calvin Ridley for
105
105.
and Keyshawn Vaughn.
Oh, that's not even relatively close. Keyshawn Vaughn should be the starting running back unless they draft somebody for the Buccaneers. And then you have the 105 for Jeff Wilson, who is just prone to breaking down, and Calvin Ridley, who we don't even know the future of.
Right.
Even before the season, I wasn't on Calvin Ridley. I think that
Same.
they need an
Thank
alpha
you.
receiver over there. Calvin Ridley's not going to be the guy if he even plays for Atlanta next year. I mean, there's a good chance that they end up moving him. So, I mean, you're getting a starting running back for a team that's going to need to run the ball unless they somehow are able to bring in a quarterback, which I don't really see too many quarterbacks
Yep.
they are going to be able to bring in on a team that, they're going to need weapons essentially. I don't see Chris Godwin coming back. And then you get a 105 pick. Oh, dude, it's not even relatively close. It's not
I
even
know.
relatively close.
See, the reason this shocked me so much is we had put out the week prior, and I was questioning Tom Lee, who's a huge Falcons fan, hence our color coordination on this program. If you would trade 110 for Calvin Ridley and he struggled, or 201 and Gabe Davis for Calvin Ridley and he struggled. So to see this pop up 105 and Keyshawn Vaughn for Calvin Ridley, basically just for Calvin Ridley, and have it be even remotely close, 44.04%. For Ridley and Jeff Wilson Jr. to 55.6% for the pick and Keyshawn Vaughn.
That's absurd.
Like the amount of people that love Calvin Ridley, and I get it. He had one big booming year, but isn't Calvin Ridley a lot closer to Kenny Golladay than not? Right? He's not really explosive with the ball in his hand. He doesn't add much after the catch. He's a deep ball threat that needs to hit. It's going to go in a situation where he's likely not going to be the number one guy again.
I don't even want him being the number one guy, to be honest with you. It just depends.
Yeah, but
how often that offense passes.
Exactly. I think it's closer to Kenny Golladay than not for Calvin Ridley, and people just don't want to see it. You can at me about that too. That's down there in the corner. Other way. But I'm very surprised by that. So we're going to take a quick second so you guys can take a break from hearing our voice. We're going to have a short show today because Chase does have to get to his other real life job. He's not just the king of the dose score. He is a bartender extraordinaire. So when we take a second, so you get a break from our voices, we're going to do this week's trades. We're going to do them quickly because I want Chase to break down his dose score because it is one of the best up and coming statistics to follow in season to help you win championships, which is, we like to kind of do that once in a while. Sit tight. We're going to be right back. It's fine. All right, Monsieur. Oh my goodness. Monsieur Chase Vernon. Oh my gosh. 1 second. Oh my Lord.
Thomas, you dying? You dying on it? All right. Thomas is dying on us, so I'm taking over the show from here on out. Welcome to Chase's Walkabout.
Yeah, I don't know. We came back from the break there. My voice decided to say no, sir. Every week, Tom Lee and I on this show in the offseason, we like to break down a couple of players that are quote unquote controversial, not really controversial, but kind of hot button topics, and see what people would be willing to actually trade for them. We talk about them on the show, then we post them on polls, and then we review, just like we just did a Yui. So for this segment, this will be our hard yaka segment of the week, which is really the the hard work, the real hard process. That's the hard yaka in Australia. We're cultural over here at the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast. So the first trade for our week, we're going to do it nice and, a couple minutes each here. Would you trade in a vacuum, of course, the 111 rookie pick for this season for, as I see all the Detroit jerseys hanging behind you, for the Detroit wide receiver who broke out late in the year, Amon-Ra St. Brown himself, Mr. Mummy's Alive himself. 111, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Take a side.
So I'm going to take the 111. I believe it's going to be pretty close overall, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, was forced into a role as to where he had to see the volume. Now he's a very good player. I thought he was great, but this Detroit Lions offense is going to be focused around Hawkinson and Swift, like we saw earlier in the year. Sure, he's still going to get his volume. He's going to be, he'll be a mid-range wide receiver 2 for the most part, which I know is it's like, wait, you can get a wide receiver 111. You can get a mid-range wide receiver 2 at 111 because you normally can't. But
Right.
typically with those types of receivers, you're not going to see much more points than, I don't know, probably 12 or so a game in full point PPR full point PPR. So I am going to go the 111 route. I'm going to play the lottery, or I'm going to use that to try and move up earlier in the draft, or use it to trade for a 2023 first round pick because I think that is significantly better than the 2022 draft class. And
Right.
if I can have a guy who's like sitting there, like let's just say the 205, right? And he sees a player that he really wants, like sliding down the board. And I'm like, hey, give me that 205 and give me your 2023 first, and we'll call it a day. Maybe I'll have to throw in a third or something like that. That's a
Mm-hmm.
big time win for me in this draft class. And so I'm going to use that pick to actually move up more so than wanting to take a pick at that time on a 2022 prospect. And I'm going to take
Sure.
that over Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I can because 111, you're drafting Olave, you're drafting, whichever quarterback is
Yeah.
your favorite at that point. Much like last year, the play was kind of always trade your late 2021 or 2022 pick for a 23. Of course, people are getting a little more with it and hip, as the kids might tell you, that the 23 class is going to be fairly good.
And it's not even
Next,
at its prime for the hype yet, by the way.
I
We haven't even
know.
begun
Yes,
to see the hype for it.
I
And yet
know.
people already are aware of this. So I'm telling you guys, if you can move back to the 2023, but I mean, the 111 is a sexy pick to move for a first
Mhm.
round pick next year. I mean, that's why I'm doing it, because the 111 is a sexier pick as we get closer to the draft than Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I don't think you can get much more than the 111 for him.
Right. And if you do, that person really loves them. Next one, this is kind of a big one. This is Dak and Austin Eckler. So two big primetime players for the 106 and 2023 first round picks.
Wait, what was that?
This is Dak Prescott and Austin Eckler, or the 106 this year and 2023 first round draft picks.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
This is a no-brainer to you, which I'm interested to see.
You got to take the 4 picks. I mean,
That's what I was wondering for you.
yeah, I mean, you got to take the 4 picks at this point because you can, trade back or trade away your first pick, your 106,
Right.
for a player like maybe Trey Lance or something like that. I know that Trey Lance went earlier this past year, probably right around that range, but I mean, there's a chance that somebody has a need and has an excess quarterback that you can move off of. I mean, you might even be able to get like the 111 and Zach Wilson or something like that, a player with a ton of
Just trade
prospects, ton of
back
hype.
for 110 and Derek Carr and call it a day.
Yeah, and
Like
you're good.
that's
You're in
easy
there.
money. I agree. This is
That
tough
was
for
a good
me.
example. Even
Yeah.
Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson
Oh
is cheap
yeah.
right now. He's
He
so
very
cheap.
the Oh my gosh. Considering that he's likely back, in all honesty, he's very cheap right now. I'm willing to take that bet. For me, it's the picks because the picks are the hot button right now. But I think that when you're talking about just fair enough value for these superstar veterans, I think that's almost a perfect deal for them because you're getting that's 2 firsts and 106 to me for Dak. Super flex value on Dak Prescott, sure. And that's a 23 first straight for Eckler. I think that's totally fine. I mean, it's pretty good. I'm going to mark you down. Chase takes the picks. It'll be very nice to see how the polls react to that one. Now, Chris, I see your question, and you're right. His value is very tough right now. Having trouble figuring Keyshawn Vaughn draft value. Penny over Vaughn, Vaughn over Rojo, Vaughn over Hubbard, or does he share the same range with all of them? I was never a Keyshawn Vaughn fan, even though he looked pretty good. But as you mentioned, Chase, he's likely the starter. Who do you like here? Personally, I would probably take Penny over everyone here. But who would you take personally?
I'm still a little bit concerned with Penny's injury history and Chris Carson, splitting the
True.
workload. And Penny looked great, don't get me wrong. So if I have Penny, I'm holding him. I'm not trying to move him at all. I want to see what I have. Like, I feel like he's just as much of a lottery pick as a draft pick is. And, you can still get relevant years out of him if he, stays on this path and can stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
However, Vaughn is also a lottery pick because if the Buccaneers go out and they spend a pick on a running back, which I 100% believe that they will, I feel like they're going to let Fournette walk. I feel like they're going to let Ronald Jones walk, and they're going to be stuck having to draft a running
True.
back. If
Mm-hmm.
they go with a guy who takes the ball on first and second downs, Vaughn is screwed because Vaughn can't catch. So that means that they're drafting Vaughn's replacement. I mean, Vaughn has to have one of the worst hands of any running back
Oh
in
my.
the NFL. He has stone hands. So if they end up drafting a
Yeah.
a back that takes the ball anywhere between like the fifth or before the fifth round, right? So fifth round could even be questionable. Fourth, third, second round pick. If the Buccaneers go in there and spend a draft pick on a guy that handles the ball on first and second down, Vaughn is screwed. He lost his job. He's done. If they go and they draft a pass catching running back, then I'm gung ho on Vaughn because that means that he's going to be seeing the carries on first and second down. If it's Kyle Trask over there, quarterback, or anybody that's even just half decent, not great, they're going to be running the ball a ton.
Yeah.
So you're going to want Vaughn. It's still a good team. It's got a great offensive line. So you're going to be able to get, usage out of Vaughn. He's going to see the holes and he's going to have breakaway runs. So he's going to get you some touchdowns as well. I like Vaughn. I don't love Vaughn. His value is completely dependent on how they draft.
Yep.
So with that being said, I would take Penny over Vaughn and Vaughn over Hubbard. I think that Hubbard is still up there, and I probably have all three of these guys higher than the average does when it comes to ranking. But I think that they're all relatively close, but they're all in different tiers.
Right, and you're generally getting them late in the drafts. I wouldn't hate on taking Rojo all of them because he is probably the most likely to sign somewhere that will use him in the way that we're all hoping he might be. So I might actually shift my answer to Rojo, but this is a tough question, Chris. Is his value?
I didn't even see Rojo up there.
His draft value is tricky. I wouldn't be touching any of them outside of the 15th, 20th round in any drafts. They're just not my favorite targets. I personally like to avoid them at all costs, but hopefully that helps you a little bit. Look, today is a shorter show, as I mentioned. So we're going to do one more trade. We're going to try to keep it quick as we can anyway.
Yeah, me.
Chase, look, these players, a lot of them have injuries. Some of them are older. Anytime, Chris, we're happy that you managed to find the time to stop by today.
Thanks for coming out.
Look, Dejo or Deontay Johnson, our stats researcher, Maddie's favorite player on planet Earth. That's FT Maddie. Favorite player on Earth, Deontay Johnson and Ramondre Stevenson, Twitter's next Derrick Henry, if you ask a certain group of folks. Or do you want the breakout extraordinaire Cordero Patterson and the two ACLs, Godwin and Gallup, in a vacuum right here?
I'll take the best player on the board, Chris Godwin.
Interesting call. Oh, my gosh. Okay. Oh, that's nice. That's
and
interesting.
Then you said Gallup and Cordell Patterson. So this trade makes no sense to me, first off. It makes literally no sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be trading equilaterally with a wide receiver who is about the same age when you have Deontay Johnson and Chris Godwin, right? They're within a year or two of each other.
Yep.
You're taking on two players with ACLs, and I'm not saying the ACLs are the same thing as they used to be because they're not. It doesn't take a full year to recover. They could end up being good to go. But typically it does take some ramp-up time to be able to get them in the game, get the receptions that they're going to need, etc. But yet you have a running back that you're receiving, Cordell Patterson, who fizzles out towards the end of the season. And so they don't really having them coexist together in the same trade just doesn't really make too much sense to me. Meanwhile, you're giving away Ramondre Stevenson, who probably has a similar upside to Cordell Patterson on a week-to-week basis, has a increasing dynasty value, but neither one can be a week-to-week must-start option at the running back position. So I don't understand why you'd make this trade if you're the Chris Godwin person. Or if you're the Deontay Johnson person, I don't understand why you'd make the trade. Essentially, I'm trying to talk myself through it because it just doesn't make any sense to me. This trade is just.
I think if I can try to add clarity to it, even though this wasn't my trade, I think is that Deontay Johnson is creeping up into that top 10, top 8 dynasty wide receiver for people, and Chris Godwin is falling out now with injury and some contract question marks. So I think that's kind of where it is. I think it's just a value shift. It's one of those off-season value shifts. So I think that would be it for me personally. I also want the Chris Godwin side of this because I believe Godwin over Deontay. I know
But
Maddie's going to come for me, but
you have to get like the Cordell Patterson side. Like I would throw him out or throw out Michael Gallup.
I
You need
know.
something with an increasing value. So we would get a draft pick. Like I know I took the Chris Godwin side because I like Chris Godwin, and then I forgot who else was attached to it because I get, I just see red whenever I see Chris Godwin. So I thought about it and I'm like, maybe I wouldn't take the Chris Godwin side. I probably wouldn't make the trade at all because I would want the Chris Godwin side, but I need better values than what you're getting with Cordell Patterson. Like, sure, he could be the same player he was last year, which means that he's going to be good for 10 games in the beginning of the season and offer you no playoff value. But you're not getting enough value back essentially, and it just doesn't make much sense because you're trading away actual production for injured players and a depreciating asset.
I know that's why it was last on our list because it was the trickiest one to get through. But I don't disagree. I think it's more of a belief that Ramondre may not be what he was, and I know that Michael Gallup is highly viewed in the full tilt circle. Again, I'm the largest outlier with the Michael Gallup love. There are people that believe he can be a 1 on some teams, and
he'll be a very good 2. He'll be Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, there you go. See, I love that there's somebody else that I can communicate with that feels the same way about Calvin Ridley as I do. Look, like I said, we're going to keep the show short for my man over here, but Chase, can you quickly run down for our listeners who may not have heard us talking about the dose score? Because on the full tilt, we definitely talked about it frequently because it was helping us win weeks. You explain what the dose score is, let everyone know where they can find it and the rest of your work before we get out of here and send you to work.
Yeah, I actually do got to keep it short. I got to be off in about 2 minutes or so in order to make it there on time. So I've developed this score that allows you to know when to play pass catching running backs. So, some of the best examples were with, Chase Edmonds, this past year and the year before that. I mean, he really shines through the dose score. Joe Mixon produced against every single terrible team up against the pass catching running backs. And in the weeks that he didn't play terrible teams that were bad up against pass catching running backs, he didn't even see receptions. He didn't even see targets because Joe Burrow never looked his way. It's like the game plan knew when to target Joe Mixon. And it's absolutely nuts. And I love that fact that Zach Taylor goes to fantasyintervention.com/dose, DOCE, to research which teams are bad up against the pass catching running backs. Zach Taylor's obviously a big fan. So no, it's
big fan.
It's a metric to tell when to play pass catching running backs and when not to play pass catching running backs. It's especially helpful for DFS because you have to find these players that are around the 4K range sometimes because you want to play a bunch of stud wide receivers. And then you see players like Nyheim Hines, Chase Edmonds, other players that just play the pass catching role, but you don't know when they're going to be good. And the trickiest part about this is there's no rhyme or reason as to why pass catching running backs succeed. Sure, you could say that there are certain teams that are always losing, so their pass catching running backs will see more action, will see more targets because of the game script, yada 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 yada. Well, the best team up against the dose score or up against pass catching running backs in 2021 was the Texans.
Yep.
And so, or I should say the one of the worst teams up against, pass catching running backs was who was it? Hold on, I don't even have it up.
I know the Ravens were pretty bad.
The Ravens were bad. Who was it? I don't even remember. I don't have my stuff up right now. But either way, it pretty much shows like when you can actually play these pass catching running backs and when you can't. Some of the best teams up against the pass catching running backs were teams that were very good throughout the season who contained them. Meanwhile, the volume that was seen on the other side just wasn't happening. So go check it out, fantasyintervention.com/DOCE.
Yeah,
Trying to butcher that, but it'll be all right.
It basically helps you get through the narratives of which pass catching running back will be good and then gives you which running back will actually be good. And that'll do it for today's show. Look, we're going to have some more information up on our giveaway for the Saquon Barkley signed Penn State jersey. You can obviously catch all of our other work over there at Trophy Smack. You can hit up fantasyintervention.com. You can hit up Dynasty Vipers YouTube network, which you should also be subscribed to get the rest of their programming. Of course, it's the offseason. They're going to have a ton of great guests. It's fantastic.
Ooh, I found it.
Oh, you found it? Who was the worst?
Sorry. So it was the best team up against pass catching running backs were the Cowboys, who won a ton of games and were always up because their offense, was dynamic and their defense was good too. The Chargers were the fourth best up against pass catching running backs. We know what happens there. With let's see, the worst team up against pass catching running backs were the Seattle Seahawks, and they were constantly losing because they had Geno Smith throughout the season. Russell Wilson, the rest of the team wasn't clicking. So the Raiders were another playoff team who they were 31st up against pass catching running backs. It's just being able to spot these teams out and thinking that you know them, even though you might not, is key.
Narrative beaters are what we're looking for to get an edge, and Chase has created this himself and is finding a way to beat the narratives, which is super important. Of course, I always want to end the show with the same words that I say every week. Be a good person, be kind to one another, don't be a huge pile of human garbage. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose, that your best days are always spent tilting. Enjoy the game. Bengals by 3. Shout out to Taylor. Look, we're out of here. Have a safe weekend, everybody.
Later.